Argentina has once again found itself at the center of global attention. Just a year ago, it seemed the country had finally gained a chance to break free from its prolonged crisis. The victory of Javier Milei, the charismatic leader who promised radical reforms, was perceived as a historic turning point. According to the Financial Times, the first months of his presidency indeed delivered tangible results. Hyperinflation was stopped, the peso stabilized, and the budget deficit reduced. International investors cautiously returned to the market, and the IMF, for the first time in many years, gave a positive assessment of the government's actions. But behind this facade of stabilization lay a much darker reality. The living standards of ordinary Argentines hardly improved. Prices in stores remain painfully high, wages humiliatingly low, and unemployment continues to weigh heavily on the youth. As Bloomberg notes, Milei's reforms turned out to be painful and dragged on longer than expected. Privatization of state companies, subsidy cuts, and trade liberalization all fueled growing social tension. Protests flared again in the streets of Buenos Aires. Unions organized strikes, and populist opposition gained strength in the provinces. This contrast between macroeconomic successes and daily frustration became the foundation for a sharp drop in approval ratings. According to the latest poll published by Clarin, confidence in Milei fell below 30%, and for the first time during his presidency, opposition parties gained the upper hand. Here lies the main danger. Today's opposition is building its campaign on a geopolitical pivot. While Milei looks to the United States and the West, his rivals openly call for integration with BRICS, strengthening ties with China and Russia, and gradually moving away from Washington's orbit. For the United States, this is a red line. Argentina is not just a country on the other side of the world, it is a strategic hub. Control over agricultural exports, lithium deposits, and access to the South Atlantic makes it too important to allow China to establish itself there. As the Wall Street Journal points out, the White House fully understands that losing Argentina would be a geopolitical defeat comparable to the expansion of BRICS in the Middle East. That is why Washington decided to intervene directly. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, in an emergency statement quoted by Reuters, announced an aid package for Argentina worth tens of billions of dollars. The funds are meant to stabilize the banking system, support infrastructure projects, and provide targeted financing for the most vulnerable social programs. For the first time, the U.S. is taking such a step without IMF mediation, which underscores the seriousness of its intentions. Insiders in diplomatic circles, cited by El País, claim this package is not just economic support, but an attempt to keep Milei in power. American strategists are convinced that if the opposition were to win elections now, Argentina would almost certainly fall into China's orbit. Moreover, Washington fears that along with joining BRICS, the country would open the doors of its lithium deposits in Jujuy province to Beijing, where Chinese corporations are already actively operating. Meanwhile, Argentina itself is balancing on the edge. In the provinces, people increasingly say that Milei's stabilization means figures in reports, not food on the table. Journalists from La Nación note that in recent months, the number of closed small businesses has surpassed pandemic levels. And in universities, students are protesting against budget cuts and demanding an alternative to the American path. Against this backdrop, the elections scheduled in the coming weeks are becoming decisive. For the first time in decades, Argentina faces a choice not only of its internal model, but also of its civilizational trajectory. Either continuing the path of alliance with the United States and Milei's painful reforms, or a pivot to BRICS and possibly short-term handouts from China and Russia. According to Politico, the White House is preparing a full-scale campaign of soft pressure, ranging from media support for Milei to active visits by American officials to Buenos Aires. Sources inside the administration report that Donald Trump himself is considering a personal meeting with Milei on the sidelines of the G20 summit to signal that Washington is backing him. But will that be enough? The economic gap between expectations and reality is far too wide. Millions of Argentines live in poverty, and they are no longer impressed by promises of future reforms. What matters to them is who can lower the price of bread, fuel, and medicine tomorrow. Here, the the opposition holds a trump card: promises of immediate deals with BRICS and an influx of Chinese loans. The entire country now waits in suspense. The elections will serve as a referendum not only on Milei, but on Argentina's future as a whole. As one Brookings Institution analyst put it, this will be the first time the outcome of an election in South America will directly determine the balance of power between the United States and China. The stakes are extremely high. Argentina, after decades of crises, has once again become an arena where global powers collide. The question is whether US intervention will save Milei and keep the country in the Western orbit, or whether the people will choose another path and hand the keys to their economy to BRICS. The answer will come very soon, and it will determine not only Argentina's fate, but also the global balance of power in the 21st century. That is why today, when the US openly announces tens of billions of dollars in aid, many Argentines see it not as support, but as a new form of dependence. Journalists from Pagina Doce write that the country risks becoming a protectorate if Washington directly controls its finances. The opposition actively uses these fears, claiming that Milei is selling sovereignty. China, meanwhile, acts with much more subtlety. As reported by Xinhua, Beijing makes no loud statements, but steadily advances its projects, from building nuclear power plants to lithium mining contracts. Within BRICS, discussions are underway about creating a special support fund for Argentina as an alternative to Western loans. Brazil, according to Folha de São Paulo, has already announced its willingness to act as a mediator and accelerate Argentina's integration into the bloc. In this way, Buenos Aires finds itself pulled in two directions by two global axes. All these steps unfold against the backdrop of a deep social divide. In Buenos Aires, one can see two entirely different rallies. At one, people hold signs saying "Gracias Milei" and thank the president for trying to save the country from an inflationary disaster. At the other, slogans of "No IMF, No USA" ring out, alongside demands to leave the Western orbit immediately. According to analysts at the Council on Foreign Relations, the coming weeks could prove decisive not only for Argentina, but for the entire region. If the opposition wins and the country takes a step toward BRICS, it will send a signal to other Latin American states that an alliance with China and Russia is a real alternative to the American path. If, however, Milei wins with Washington's backing, the United States will secure a new foothold in South America, effectively turning Argentina into a strategic outpost for countering China. Too much is at stake. Today, Argentina is more than just an economy, more than just politics. It is an arena where the interests of global powers intersect, and the outcome of its elections could trigger a chain reaction across the entire global South.